Okay, so I never made a leaving my faith video, and I wasn't raptured, and it's Sunday, so it kind of seems appropriate to do. So I wanted to talk about both the leaving of my faith and the restoring of my faith, or the rebuilding of my faith. Um, Rebuilding is probably a better word. Um, but there is a lot to talk about here, so I'm just going to hit it on the pivotal moments. I was raised fundamentalist Christian, so my stepfather was a fundamentalist Christian. He heavily believed in the Bible, and so just naturally I was inclined to think that way. And I did, in fact, have moments of like reading my Bible a lot, not because I enjoyed reading the Bible or even that I enjoyed reading. It was actually something that I struggled with, that I had to later learn to appreciate and enjoy. But I'm reading my Bible just out of pure guilt. So I am actually reading chapters of the Bible. I hadn't read the whole Bible at this point. But I also lived in a rougher area and also a very sort of, I guess, eclectic community, you could say, or a lot of different people. So at the age of 12, up until about 16, and then especially at this time, my stepfather is no longer my stepfather. So, I spend that time really being like a rebellious kid. I'm still Christian, but I'm not really absorbed into the narratives of Christianity. But I end up going to a different high school than the schools that were in the area that I grew up in. And I got really heavily involved in the church community there. I had friends who were fundamentalist Christians. It was what I knew. So I decided, okay, I am going to take this thing seriously. I believe it. It was what I was, raised on at the time, but I believe it naturally. So I start getting involved in groups, and I am fasting for days at a time, sometimes, a week or more. I am reading my Bible quite often. I'm having these conversations. And there are these moments that a lot of Christians talk about, though they don't ever talk about it with themselves honestly, where strange things were happening. There was a lot of bad behavior of people at my church in terms of the way that they talked about other people. So there was this kind of like, oh, we don't, hate the sinner, or, hate the sin, not the sinner. But that's not the way they behaved. They made fun of people when no one was around. They even made fun of people at the church too. So, this was a certain behavior or demeanor. Not that I think all Christians are like this, or that even all necessarily fundamentalist Christians are like this. But I do think many are, and for good reason, in terms of there has to be an emotional or personal growth that has to happen, or else you're going to behave these ways. And then other strange things, like I would bring up parts of the Bible. To me, this isn't about the authority of my pastor or my friends, or none of that should matter. The Bible and God is the authority. So it was really strange to me when I would get scorned, or I would get a triggered emotional reaction from other people for just mentioning passages, right? And trying to have an open conversation about it. So that immediately started to, that's very strange, but I'm still a Christian. Just because they act that way, that's kind of the thing that Christians start to tell themselves, is just because, they are bad Christians doesn't mean we shouldn't be Christians. And that's absolutely correct. But again, it's never really self-reflective. I know people who still think to this day that it's the other Christians that turn them off, and that turned people who were formerly Christians off. But it's like, no, it's you, the way that you talk about people, the way that you're easily triggered, you know so these things, people really start to hone in on, wait, what is God providing for us? If God can't provide us stability when we're being challenged, if God can't provide you that inner peace at, you know, a moment's notice, when other people who are meditating can get that, why is that? Why is the thing that you are most connected to, that's supposed to be the most powerful being, can't give you inner peace when ego becomes involved? Also is also a very strange thing. Is it's always over their egos. It's actually never about the Bible. It's never about God. It is always what they think about the Bible, or what they think about God. So also a very interesting thing. Um, but I'm still Christian. There was this moment, I actually read a book called Why So Many Gods, and that was really pivotal for me. It was actually Christian. It was written by Christians that were trying to convince people that Christianity was the right way. though they were also trying to be open and honest, and I appreciated that, but unfortunately it had the opposite effect. I genuinely believe they were trying to be open and honest in their creation of the book, and they just couldn't do it because there are skill gaps there. So that's something that I almost noticed. This was actually a changing moment for me where I stopped being Christian for a moment, and that I noticed that this book was deliberately not um, being correct about what these other philosophies actually believed and said. And it's just like we're in the age of the internet, so you can go look up what they say. And so that immediately I was like, oh, that's weird. That's weird that this book I can now tell is trying to manipulate me. And again, not even intentionally. Again, I do think the person that created that book was good faith on the surface. The problem is there's a lot of subconscious things going on. They can't help but paint it in an incorrect light. So I saw that and I decided, okay, I actually don't have any particular reasons to be Christian in, specifically. So I kind of became open, and I just collected a bunch of parts of religions, including Christianity, that I had heard of and was familiar with. So sort of like Native American spirituality and some of these things. But then what happened was I started working at a prison, and that prison was pretty extreme. I might share my thoughts on that prison and working there, and other times it's a pretty crazy stories that I have receipts for that even apply to today. But it's a very shocking environment, and in that shocking environment, I'm pretty sure, at least in my view, what happened was I went back to the thing that was most comfortable to me, and that was fundamental Christianity. So now I am working at a prison at the age of, I think, 19 or 20, and I'm a fundamentalist Christian again. I'm trying to figure out what I want to do in terms of my career. I'm pretty sure I'm just going into the military. That's where my mind is at. But it's I see some. I can talk about also my venture wanting to go into the military and seeing friends go into the military and being very involved in JROTC and those types of mindsets. But again, this is just about the conversion right now. So, I went back to what was comfortable, and I started to take college classes because that was one of the things that was recommended to me too. It's just like, hey, if you're not sure now if you're going to go into the military, you probably want to take some college classes, or even if you end up going, even if you end up going to the military, then you still have those credits. There's just no downside. So I ended up going. And one of the things that I noticed was I'd never really learned how to be a good student. I was just poor at it, okay? From early on to late on, I was really sick, and I can talk about all that and all the excuses and stuff, but I was an unintelligent, I was an ignorant person for a long time. But going to college classes, I decided I want to learn how to learn. I'm going to take this seriously. And I did. And then I start learning about the actual evidence behind the Big Bang. And, I'm mostly consulting creationist sources on all this the whole time, and reading my girlfriend at the time, who became my wife. She was going to a creationist school. One of my best friends was going to a creationist school. So we're constantly just engaging with this material and talking about it. And then just honestly, all of us feeling like it's not right. Like there's information being ignored and intentionally misconstrued and distorted. And so it was, once I saw that fundamentalist Christianity was, in my view, misrepresenting these other perspectives, that started to change my view of fundamentalist Christianity. And I didn't become an atheist right away. I was a deist. But my ex at the time, she was an atheist, and I was really getting to this idea of like, how do I figure out what's true? And really the best thing that I've come up with even today is to just listen to the arguments and go through each of them, and to have the skills you need to think about them critically. So that's what I'm doing. And so she just asked me, like, what is your argument for God? And I didn't have one. I actually still don't necessarily have a good one, which I'll talk about here in a second in my restoring of faith. But that was it. It was just like, look, I don't have an argument for it, so it's got to go. That was my mindset at the time, and I stayed in that mindset for probably 7-8 years. Where I anything that looked like spirituality at all. No, anything that looked like religion, I would shirk off. In terms of spirituality, I was going now on the mental health and mental growth and personal growth path and kick. And so I started meditating and reading books about how the mind works, and and going down that path. But this is all really scientific in nature. And so, again, anything that has to do with anything that looks like spiritual or other dimensions, anything that can't be verified with some type of academic argument, I'm pretty much going to be dismissive of. And then I start hearing about people like Donald Hoffman or in his work and how evolution works, and how evolution doesn't necessarily have to work so that we perceive reality. It can be the case that it's beneficial for us to not perceive what reality is. So the situation is much more complex. And then hearing about the placebo, there's a study that was done that isn't often talked about, where they gave people a placebo pill, but they told them that it was a placebo and it still works. So now we're talking about the power of belief. And then I'm reading Lisa Feldman Barrett and constructivist interpretations. I don't necessarily agree with all that because I tend to follow the consensus, but there's not a lack of consensus. There's disagreement. And so it does seem in part that our brains work on this constructivist notion, which is the idea that our brains create reality, that our brains are the architects, that we are the architects of our experience through our brain. And that's what really started to change the game to me, where I went back and I said, okay, maybe I don't need an argument for all of the things that I believe if it helps me and I'm not hurting other people. And I started to do that, and lo and behold, it did actually work. It's this weird thing where our brain is not interpreting reality to the full extent. It might be to some degree, but it is also simulating it. And what that means is that it doesn't have to simulate it one-to-one. It can simulate something completely different than what reality is, as long as it's beneficial for you. So this then became the restoring of the faith, and where I'm at now with all this. So going through a process of feeling like fundamentalist Christianity really not only is not validated, but the attitudes of people in those community aren't the attitudes that I want to foster or be a part of. I want to be able to cultivate inner peace no matter what. I don't want to have a belief system where if someone's challenging me, or someone's challenging me or my ideas about the extra stuff that's going on in the universe past what we can prove through science, that I take that personally, and I start to get triggered when people ask me questions about it, or I get triggered whenever there's a seeming contradiction in it. This is very weird behavior. And I went back to my old Christian friends or those contexts, and even have talked to lots of fundamentalist Christian people. And it is the same attitude over and over, where at some point I bring up a Bible verse, or I am being cordial. I'm not calling anybody names. I'm asking them to define something for me, and a switch flips in them that is very, what I would say, if they could be more self-reflective, they would consider demonic. I mean, it is like literally like that. It's like the flip of a switch. They go from 0 to 100 because of a question. And this isn't that other people and other groups can't do these things, by the way. So this isn't a conversation about these. It's just not what I would expect from a people that are really sort of quote unquote tapped into God. So it's just like, I believe in multiple universes. I believe in God. I believe in, getting better at focusing on your inner peace. And then that will lead to, if not an improvement in this life, which it totally can, in other lives. But if you challenge me on these things, I'm not going to be triggered by them. If you, what's your evidence for this? It's going to be like, well, I did just something that helps me and makes me feel better. And we can talk about how there might be evidence for this and multiverses and stuff, but none of that stuff is conclusive in terms of the science. So I can completely remove my ego, which makes perfect sense, because as I'm talking about God, when I get in the presence of God, none of that stuff matters or makes sense. So maybe I'm not in the presence of God. Maybe there's a demonic spirit or force out there that provides you with inner peace and makes it so that you're not involved with your ego, so that if somebody says something against your ideas, you don't immediately blow up. Maybe that is very demonic, and I just don't understand what God really is. It's just not what I would expect, because the triggering thing is something that happens to everybody in all the other fundamentalist religions I look at. So there's nothing special about that behavior. That is exactly in line with all the other fundamentalist religion. There is nothing new there. Yeah, so that was really it. Recognizing that I didn't have any good arguments for God, but if I understood how the brain worked and I was open and honest, I didn't need one. And not only did I need one, sometimes it was better to not have one, because now my ego isn't as invested in the conversations about these things. I can have open and honest conversations about my faith, and that faith can change and it's malleable, and it works so that I am able to focus. I can see things more clearly. I have more management of I have better management of my emotions. These types of things that I want, and that I see really a lot of people want, but they just struggle to give it to themselves, and they end up in the same loops. I also noticed this about fundamentalist Christianity, something that I'm glad to no longer be a part of, where you go through these cycles of being a good person and wanting to improve, and then failing at that, and then really feeling guilty, and then remembering that Christianity is about forgiveness, and then feeling, okay that you didn't improve. But you do get into this trap where you really struggle to actually make good headway in your improvements in emotional management and these types of things. Most fundamentalists I know really struggle to manage their emotions, and they take it out on the people that they care about. I grew up with it. I continue to see it in these people. And it's something that I've been able to shed off. I used to treat people in my life much worse. And part of that is my responsibility. It has nothing to do with Christianity, just one of those things you have to learn to take responsibility for your own actions. And I don't do that anymore. I treat the things around me with so much love and understanding and compassion, even when they mess up a lot. I connect with my God, and none of it's all okay. And then we pick up the mess from there collectively with our composure and our mind straight. We don't snap and then I yell at my dogs or pets and then, oh, I'm so sorry later. I've been through that cycle before. Not that that cycle is necessarily completely bad, but I do see a lot of people get stagnant because of a fundamentalist view of Christian faith. I do fear that if you focus too much on that, you don't get the growth that you need, because you really do need to understand aspects of science. And that, by the way, I don't see as a contradiction with the Bible. I'll talk about that a different time, but that's basically it. Yeah, so that's the rundown. I just wanted to share it because I haven't done it yet. So science brought me out of it, but science kind of, oddly enough, brought me into it, not because of some justification I have in terms of what the universe is signaling in terms of God existing, but this weird thing where our brain seems to respond to our beliefs, whether they're true or not, and being able to utilize that to my advantage was the restoration of my faith. And I feel like I can, oddly enough, see God even more clear than what I did before, in terms of, again, my emotions aren't as wrapped up into the process. I understand that this is an aspect of my own mind that I find useful. I don't have to force it on other people. Maybe they're a different belief than what I have will help them. And that's good. I just want them to get the help that they need to manage their emotions and live a better life, and don't hurt other people with it. Those are really the two criteria for me. Don't hurt other people that aren't hurting other people. It gets complicated in terms of morality, but in terms of faith, it shouldn't be that complicated. It's okay to have your faith, but if you understand how the mind works, you understand different faiths might actually help different people differently, and really take a close look at your own faith and ask, how much is it helping me in terms of my emotions? How much is it helping me in terms of how much I can take in terms of truth about myself? Because that's another thing that I noticed too, is I can only talk to fundamentalist Christians so much about what I think about them. And again, they start to get triggered. Whereas you can tell me what you think about me. You can tell me what you think about my faith. You can tell me what you think about science. You can tell me all of these things, and I'm going to have a composed conversation with you, as long as you're not attacking me or pushing me up against a wall. If the conditions are fair, you will see me stay composed. I've created fair conditions, and people do not stay composed, and it is usually related to their fundamentalist belief. So it's definitely something to reflect on, the difference between having a fundamentalist belief or having a faith, and what that faith is and how it works for you or against you, and really examining that. And the Bible says that the fruits reveal what the tree is. So it's just like, what are your fruits? Are you taking your emotions out on the people closest to you? Are you making headway in those ways? Are you really still pretty much, maybe there's some emotional maturity, but you're still pretty much, you have those deep triggers that you're just not working on. Um, that should be a problem for people of faith, but um, self-awareness and self-reflection are difficult things and complicated landscapes. But anyway, that's my story. I have a lot more to say about other things, but I will do that in the future. Everybody have a good Sunday.